Hi, enjoy listening. The first thing people noticed about Eli Dawson was how quiet he was. He wasn't the kind of quiet that made others uncomfortable, just the kind that made him easy to overlook. At 20, Eli had already learned the value of staying invisible. He moved through life like a shadow, steady, unobtrusive, and dependable. His apartment was a modest one-bedroom on the outskirts of a faded Midwestern city, tucked behind a gas station and a boarded-up laundromat. The rent was cheap. The paint peeled in the hallway, and the plumbing sometimes groaned at night like something alive. But it was his. The state had handed him the keys to the unit on his 18th birthday, the same day he aged out of the foster system. There had been no cake, no candles, no hugs. Just a signature on a release form and a key dropped into his hand with a half-hearted good luck. It wasn't much, but Eli had made it a home. He kept the place neat, military neat. Dishes never sat in the sink. The floors gleamed with weekly polish. The second-hand couch was patched in places, but it held its shape. A stack of library books sat beside his bed, and a small potted plant, a gift from a co-worker, stood proudly on the windowsill. He called it Rosie. Somehow it survived, even when he forgot to water it. Eli worked full-time as a loader at Mid-State Freight, a warehouse operation about 45 minutes from his apartment by bus. The job was hard on his back and unforgiving in winter, but it was honest work. He liked the rhythm of it. Boxes in, boxes out. No questions, no drama. The other workers were mostly decent guys, older men with beer bellies and weekend fishing plans. Eli didn't talk much, but he listened well, which earned him a quiet kind of respect. "He's a good kid," his supervisor once said. "Doesn't say much, but shows up, works hard, doesn't complain." That's all Eli had ever wanted, to be counted on, to matter. After work, he usually went straight home, stopping only to grab something quick for dinner. Frozen burritos, canned soup, bread, and peanut butter. He didn't cook much. He didn't see the point. Meals were just fuel, not occasions. His evenings were quiet. Sometimes he watched old movies on the tiny TV that came with the apartment. Other times he read, mostly fiction, sometimes books about astronomy or history. He liked stories about people who rose from nothing. He liked the idea that you could rewrite the ending, even if you didn't get to write the beginning. Eli had no photos from childhood. No baby shoes, no birthday cards tucked in a drawer. He remembered snippets, flickers of a woman with dark hair, the scent of cigarette smoke on a wool sweater, the sound of a lullaby hummed off-key. But he didn't know her name, didn't even know if she was alive. The system had a name on record, Margot Dawson, but the file was thin. No contact information, no history, no follow-ups. Still, Eli wasn't bitter. Not really. There were plenty of kids in foster care who turned cold and angry. But Eli had gone the other way. He was careful, quiet, polite. He learned early how to make himself small, how to keep expectations low, how not to ask for too much. Maybe that's why people trusted him with their secrets. One of the janitors at the warehouse, a big man named Lou, once pulled him aside and confessed that he couldn't read. Another time, a driver admitted that his wife was cheating on him and he didn't know what to do. Eli never told a soul. He just listened, nodded, and offered what comfort he could. They never asked about his story, and that suited him fine. Weekends were for sleep, or for his second job, cleaning a dental office downtown. The pay wasn't great, but it helped with groceries and bus fare. Eli didn't spend money on much else. No subscriptions, no dating apps, no clubs. Sometimes he thought about meeting someone, but the idea felt foreign, like he hadn't earned the right to that kind of happiness. Besides, who would want a guy like him? No degree, no family, no name that meant anything. Just Eli. Just a quiet boy with worn-out sneakers and calloused hands. But life, like the best stories, has a way of twisting when you least expect it. And Eli Dawson, though he didn't know it yet, was about to stumble into the middle of a chapter that would change everything. It was a Tuesday evening, cold, grey and slow as honey poured over gravel. Eli had just finished his shift at Mid-State Freight and was wedged into the corner seat of a packed city bus, the kind that groaned with every bump and smelled faintly of wet boots and burnt coffee. The sky outside was already dark, a curtain of winter clouds pressing low over the streetlights. Eli's head leaned against the frosted window, eyes half closed. His shoulders ached from lifting pallets all day. His fingers still tingled from the cold. The low hum of the engine, mixed with the warm air blasting from the vents, made it hard to stay awake. That's when he saw her. She stepped onto the bus like she didn't quite belong there. Not in a snobbish way, more like she was just too crisp for the grime around her. Her white coat stood out like snow on coal, clean and soft-looking, tailored to her tall frame. Long blonde hair spilled down from beneath a cream-coloured beanie. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, lashes dark and feathery. She looked like she belonged in a catalogue. Eli blinked. He looked away quickly, unsure why his heart suddenly kicked in his chest. The woman moved down the aisle, her boots making soft clicks on the rubber floor, and ended up sitting across from him, close enough for Eli to catch the scent of citrus and something floral. She didn't notice him. She pulled out her phone and began typing quickly, eyebrows slightly furrowed, her thumb moving in elegant little swipes. Eli tried not to stare. He told himself not to stare. But still, he noticed things, like the gold chain at her neck, and the tiny chip in her right thumbnail, and the way her foot tapped the floor in restless rhythm. She looked like someone who had places to be, people to see. Not someone who ended up on a freezing city bus at 7:40 p.m. Then, as the bus jolted to a stop near 8th and Howard, she stood up too fast. Her bag, an elegant leather satchel the colour of coffee beans, slid from her lap and landed on the seat. She didn't notice. The doors hissed open and she disappeared into the dark. "Hey, wait!" Eli called out, grabbing the bag and rushing to the front. The driver blinked in the mirror. "You getting off or what?" Eli barely heard him. He darted off the bus and into the icy wind. The street was almost empty. Just a few late commuters huddled in scarves. He spotted her half a block ahead, her silhouette framed under a flickering street lamp. "Miss, you forgot your bag!" She turned sharply, startled. He jogged up to her, holding out the bag. "You left this!" Her mouth parted in surprise, then curved into a warm smile. "Oh my God, I didn't even realize. Thank you so much." She took it from him, clutching it to her chest. "That would have been a disaster." Eli nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's no problem." She tilted her head, examining him for the first time. "That was really kind of you. Most people wouldn't have bothered." He shrugged. Seemed like the right thing. A brief silence fell between them, just long enough for the wind to whisper through. "I'm Madeline," she said, sticking out a gloved hand. Eli blinked. "Eli!" They shook. Her grip was soft but firm. "Well, Eli," Madeline said, glancing at the coffee shop across the street, "can I at least buy you something hot for the trouble? You just saved me hours of stress." Eli hesitated. His shift clothes were rumpled, his boots scuffed. He wasn't used to attention, especially not from someone who looked like her. But her eyes were honest. No condescension, no flirtation. Just kindness. "Okay," he said quietly. "Sure." The cafe smelled like cinnamon and espresso. A quiet hum of acoustic guitar played from the overhead speakers. They found a small table near the window, steaming mugs between them. Madeline ordered a chai latte with oat milk. Eli got plain black coffee. "So," she said, unwrapping a muffin, "what do you do, Eli?" He paused. "I work at a warehouse, shipping and receiving." She smiled, not missing a beat. "Honest job. Pays the bills." She nodded, her eyes never judging. "I do marketing. Well, interning, technically. Social media, branding, that sort of thing." He sipped his coffee, watching her. She was vibrant in a way he wasn't used to. Confident but not loud. Polished but not fake. They talked for nearly an hour. About books. She loved poetry. He preferred stories with grit. About music. He liked older rock. She liked folk. About the city, the cold, the weird old man who played saxophone outside the courthouse every morning. Eli found himself laughing. Actually laughing. When the clock on the wall hit 9 o'clock, Madeline glanced at her phone and frowned. "I should probably head out." "Yeah," he said, suddenly wishing time moved slower. She stood, pulling her coat tight. "Can I give you my number?" Eli blinked. Yeah, sure." She wrote it on a napkin. "Text me sometime. Seriously. You seem real. That's rare." He nodded, holding the napkin like it was made of glass. "Okay." As they stepped outside, Madeline turned to him one last time. "Thanks again, Eli, for the bag and the company." Then she smiled, and it wasn't the kind you give a stranger. It was the kind that stays with you. Eli didn't sleep much that night. He lay on his back in bed, staring at the ceiling, one hand behind his head, the other resting on the folded napkin Madeline had given him. Her number stared back at him in neat, rounded handwriting, a little heart dotting the I. It felt like a small miracle. Not just that a girl like her had talked to him, but that she'd meant it, that she'd seen something in him worth noticing. It had been a long time since anyone had. He didn't text her right away. He didn't want to come off as overeager, or worse, desperate. He waited until the next afternoon, during his short break between unloading pallets. He typed out a simple message. "Hey, it's Eli from the bus. Thanks again for the latte." She responded within minutes. "Eli, I was hoping you'd text. That was the best part of my week." He smiled, surprised at how warm that made him feel. Over the next few weeks, they started seeing each other more often. Always casual. Coffee after work. Long walks in the park. Late-night phone calls when neither wanted to hang up first. It all felt light and natural, like slipping into a story already in progress. Eli learned that Madeline had grown up in the same city, in a quiet neighborhood filled with tall trees and big porches. She'd gone to private school, took piano lessons as a kid, and spent her summers at a lake cabin in Wisconsin. Her father ran a small but thriving logistics firm, and her mother organized charity events and managed the family's calendar like a military commander. "I used to complain about having too many activities," Madeline had laughed one night. "But I think they were just trying to keep me busy, keep me out of trouble." "And did it work?" Eli asked, teasing. "Mostly. Unless you count sneaking out at 17 to get my cartilage pierced." Eli grinned. "You rebel." "I know," she said, mockingly solemn. "Very edgy." They were different, obviously. Eli had no lake house memories, no piano lessons, no helicopter parents. But Madeline never made him feel small about it. She listened when he spoke, asked questions that weren't just polite filler. She liked hearing about the jobs he'd had, the books he read, the way he quietly observed people. But it wasn't lost on Eli that their worlds were miles apart. It was the little things. Madeline always looked put together. Elegant coats, carefully applied makeup, boots that probably cost more than his month's rent. Her purse alone could have paid his grocery bills for weeks. She never bragged, never flaunted, but wealth clung to her like perfume, faint but undeniable. Eli, on the other hand, still wore the same scuffed work boots he'd had since senior year of high school. His coat had a patch under one arm where the seam had split last winter. He didn't own a car. He never ordered appetizers, and he always looked at the price column on a menu before deciding if he was hungry. One night, as they strolled past a boutique window downtown, Madeline stopped to admire a deep green velvet dress. "It's gorgeous," she said. "Not that I need another one." Eli gave a small smile. "Looks expensive." "Probably," she said with a shrug. "But it's not about price. It's about how it makes you feel." Eli nodded, but the words sat heavily in his chest. He tried not to let it show. Despite their growing closeness, Madeline remained guarded when it came to physical affection. She liked to hold his hand, rest her head on his shoulder. But when Eli leaned in once, tentative, hoping for a kiss, she gently pulled back and gave him an apologetic smile. "I know it's silly," she said. I want things to be done the right way." He nodded. "Of course. I know I come off like I've got everything figured out, but I guess I'm kind of old-fashioned," she said, looking away. "I think love should mean something, and if it's real, it should start with commitment." "You mean like marriage?" She looked down. "Eventually, yeah, if that's where it's heading." Eli didn't laugh. He didn't flinch. He just nodded slowly. Truthfully, he'd never thought that far ahead, not because he didn't want to, but because it always felt like a life reserved for someone else. People with families, traditions, Sunday dinners, and holiday trips. Not foster kids who aged out of the system and learned to boil ramen at 15. But the idea of being worthy of someone like Madeline, earning that kind of future, it made something in his chest ache. Still, a part of him wondered if she truly understood the gulf between them. She had choices, options, a family that had her back. He had no safety net, no fallback plan. Sometimes Eli would lie in bed at night and picture her apartment, cozy, warm, full of soft throws and candles. Then he'd glance around his own place. Cracked tiles, sagging mattress, and Rosie, the dying plant on the windowsill. He felt like he was living a borrowed story. But then she'd call, her voice bright, asking if he wanted to grab a slice of pie or take a walk before sunset. And everything, his doubts, his fears, would fall quiet. Because when Madeline smiled at him, when she laughed at his dry jokes or teased him about always being 5 minutes early, it didn't matter where he came from. For those few hours, he wasn't just Eli the orphan, Eli the warehouse guy. He was just Eli. And maybe, just maybe, that could be enough. Eli stood at the edge of the upscale neighborhood, staring at the wrought iron gates of the Carrington residence. The estate loomed behind them, grand, symmetrical, almost clinical in its perfection. He hadn't meant to come here. In fact, he told himself this morning that today was for errands. Groceries, laundry, a walk in the park if the weather held. But his feet had carried him here uninvited. He wasn't sure why. Maybe curiosity, maybe longing, maybe fear. Madeline, had mentioned, offhandedly, that her parents were hosting a garden brunch for a few friends of the family. Philanthropists, business associates, and one state senator. It wasn't for her, she'd said. She hated the performance of it all. But she'd be there, smiling dutifully beside her mother, wearing a dress she didn't pick, serving drinks she wouldn't touch. And now, here Eli stood, just outside the world she came from. He turned before anyone could notice and walked away, shoulders hunched against the breeze. Later that evening, Eli sat across from Madeline at their usual coffee shop. She wore a soft grey sweater and jeans, her hair still pinned loosely from earlier. A few strands had fallen free, brushing her cheeks. "You wouldn't believe the spread," she said, rolling her eyes. "Crab salad on crostini, asparagus in puff pastry, lemon tarts dusted with edible gold. Who even eats like that?" Eli smiled faintly. "Sounds fancy." "It was ridiculous." She sipped her tea. "Half the people there didn't even like each other. My mum spent the whole time whispering introductions and nudging me to laugh at bad jokes." "Did you?" "Only when I had to." They fell into a familiar rhythm, joking, talking, sharing quiet looks. But Eli couldn't stop thinking about that house, those gates, the way he'd felt like a ghost, just watching from the edge. "Your dad," he said after a pause. "He run the business you mentioned." She nodded. "Carrington Logistics. My grandfather started it. My dad made it into a national operation." Eli's brows drew together slightly. "Carrington Logistics? Like the trucks with the red falcon logo?" "That's the one." He didn't say anything for a moment. He knew that name. Back at the group home, there'd been one other boy his age, Jesse, whose file had been left open on a desk once, and Eli had glanced at it by accident. A birth certificate, a father's name, Alan Carrington. Same name on the side of every red truck they passed on the highway. He remembered it vividly, because Jesse had run away 2 weeks later and never come back. Eli shook the thought. Just coincidence. Carrington wasn't exactly a rare name. Still, something uneasy settled in his gut. A few nights later, Madeline invited Eli over for dinner. Not to her parents' house, thankfully, but to her own apartment. It was the first time he'd seen her place up close. It was beautiful. Warm amber lights, books stacked in little nooks, soft music drifting from hidden speakers. Everything smelled faintly of sandalwood and clean linen. It felt like He stood and walked closer. There, just behind the photo, partially obscured by a decorative candle, was a second picture. This one was older, sepia-toned, almost faded. A younger Alan Carrington holding a toddler in his arms. The woman beside him had long auburn hair and wore a shy, tired smile. Eli's heart stopped. He knew that face. He didn't remember much about his mother. Just flashes, soft singing, the scent of lilacs, the feel of her arms around him on cold nights. But this picture brought it all rushing back. The woman in the photograph was her. He stumbled back a step. Madeline turned, catching the movement. "You okay?" He nodded stiffly. "Yeah, just dizzy for a second." "You sure? You look pale." "I just need some air." He didn't explain. He left quickly, mumbling something about an early shift. Outside, the night felt colder than it had any right to be. He walked for blocks, the weight of the discovery pressing on him like an avalanche. Alan Carrington, Madeline's father, was his father too. There was no doubt now. That photo proved it. But why hadn't he known? Why had no one told him? Why had his mother vanished into the haze of memory, while his father built empires and threw garden brunches? And what did that make Madeline? His sister? No, it didn't add up. Not unless... His thoughts spiraled. Was it possible that Alan didn't know he had another son? Had his mother left without telling him? Or had he turned his back? The questions piled faster than he could breathe. He leaned against a lamppost and stared up at the dark sky. He had found love, but now under the weight of a truth buried too long, that love felt like a thread unraveling fast. Eli didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his thoughts circling like vultures. His body was still, but his mind raced. Every moment he had spent with Madeline now flickered with a sinister glow. Her laughter, her touch, even the way she'd first looked at him. It all suddenly felt like a cruel joke fate had been playing behind his back. Morning arrived without mercy. He dressed in silence, left his small apartment, and walked for nearly an hour. At the county clerk's office, he requested his birth certificate. The woman at the counter raised an eyebrow when he didn't know his mother's maiden name. "I was in state care most of my childhood," he said flatly. "Can you check by my social?" She typed in silence. After a few moments, the printer whirred behind her. "Here," she said, handing over a single sheet. Eli scanned the document with shaking hands. Mother, Julia Wren. Father, not listed. His heart sank. No Alan Carrington, no father at all. But a name was something. Julia Wren. He spent the next hour on the library computer, digging through old public records and databases. It was slow going. Obituaries, old hospital files, court records. Finally, in a decades-old property tax record from a neighbouring town, he found a hit. Julia Wren, leaseholder, apartment 3B, Westbrook Lane. Evicted. No forwarding address. She had existed. She had tried, even if it all fell apart. Still, there was nothing that definitively tied her to Alan Carrington. Nothing, except that photograph in Madeline's apartment. And that he couldn't explain away. That evening, Eli showed up at Madeline's door. She greeted him with a smile that quickly faded when she saw his expression. "What happened?" she asked. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice low. She stepped aside without a word. They sat opposite each other on the couch. The warmth that usually lived between them had vanished. There was only the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant noise of traffic through the windows. Eli took a breath. "That photo in your bookshelf, the one behind the candle." Madeline frowned. "Which one? The old one? Your dad holding a toddler? Your mum's not in it." "Oh," she said, brushing hair behind her ear. "That's not my mum. My dad used to date someone else before he met her. He almost married her, I think." Eli's pulse jumped. "Do you know her name?" She hesitated. "Not really. I think it was Julia? Jules, maybe? Why?" He felt his breath leave him. "She's my mother," he said quietly. Madeline blinked, stunned. "What?" "I saw her face in that photo. I remember her from when I was little. And I got my birth certificate this morning. Her name is Julia Wren." Madeline stared at him, mouth slightly open, as if trying to process the pieces. "But are you saying—" "I think Alan Carrington is my father," Eli said, voice almost breaking. "Which means no." She stood up abruptly, as if the words had physically struck her. "No, that can't be. You're wrong. I wish I was." She backed away, wrapping her arms around herself. "There must be another explanation." "I don't know. Maybe your dad doesn't even know I exist. Maybe my mum left without telling him. But that photo— Madeline, you said it yourself. That woman was Julia. That kid," he pointed to himself, "that was me." Madeline turned to the window. Her shoulders shook. She didn't say anything for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was hollow. "I don't know what to do with this." "Neither do I," Eli admitted. "But I had to tell you." She turned around slowly, eyes wet. "Do you still feel the same about me?" He hesitated. "I don't know what I feel right now." Silence wrapped around them, dense and heavy. They didn't kiss goodbye. They didn't even touch. Eli walked home in the dark, feeling the city press in on him from all sides. Neon lights flickered. A siren wailed in the distance. He passed people laughing, fighting, hurrying home, all oblivious to the world that had just caved in on him. He had spent his whole life wondering where he came from. Now that he had an answer, he almost wished he hadn't asked. Alan Carrington was not the kind of man you called on a whim. He was used to people scheduling through his assistant, speaking in polite tones, wearing blazers even when it was 90 degrees. But Eli didn't own a blazer, just like Eli dreamed of doing. The receptionist looked up from her monitor. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Eli said, "but I need to speak with Alan Carrington. It's personal." Her smile didn't flinch. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Carrington doesn't accept unscheduled visitors." "Tell him it's about Julia Wren," Eli said. That made her pause. She picked up the phone, murmured into it, eyes flicking to Eli once. Then she hung up and stood. "Follow me." The office at the top floor was exactly what Eli expected. Expensive, sterile, efficient. Like its owner. Alan Carrington stood by the tall window, talking on the phone. He was older now than in the photo, silver at the temples, more rigid in posture, but unmistakably the same man. He turned when Eli walked in, his eyes sharp, assessing. "I'll call you back," he muttered into the phone and hung up. He looked Eli up and down, taking in the denim jacket, the tired eyes, the tension in his jaw. "You're the one who mentioned Julia." Eli nodded. "Yeah. What's this about?" "My name is Eli. Eli Wren," he said, the name foreign even to his own ears. "Julia was my mother." Something flickered in Carrington's face. Shock, memory, guilt. It was gone in a second. "I haven't heard that name in over 20 years, he said. "You knew her?" Carrington walked slowly to his desk, sat. "We were together once, briefly, but that ended a long time ago." Eli felt his chest tighten. "Did you know she had a child?" Carrington didn't answer immediately. His fingers tapped on the table, 1, 2, 3, like a habit formed under pressure. "She never told me." "But look at me," Eli said, voice rising slightly. "You don't see it. I look just like you." Carrington studied him again. The resemblance was undeniable now. Same brow, same mouth, same quiet fire in the eyes. "I didn't know," Carrington said quietly. "My birth certificate doesn't list a father," Eli added. "I was raised in state care. My mum died before I ever really knew her. No family, no name, nothing. A silence stretched between them. Carrington finally leaned back, a long sigh escaping his lips. "She left, just vanished. I thought she'd moved on. If I had known." "If you had known what?" Eli asked, bitterness rising in his throat. "You would have sent someone to track us down? Written a check? I would have done something. That's easy to say now." Carrington didn't flinch. "I understand you're angry. I would be too. But I didn't abandon you, Eli. I didn't know you existed." Eli stared at him, fists clenched. "I didn't come here for apologies." "Then why did you come?" Eli hesitated. The answer shifted beneath him like loose ground. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "Maybe to see if you're the kind of man I hoped you wouldn't be." Carrington didn't respond. He looked strangely sad. "Madeline," Eli added, as if the name had been forced out of him. "She doesn't know what to do with this." Carrington's eyes darkened. "You and my daughter." Eli gave a tight nod. "We didn't know. It wasn't planned." Carrington's voice dropped. This could ruin everything. Eli's jaw clenched. It already did. When he left the building, the world felt even heavier than before. He didn't have answers, only more questions. He wasn't sure if he hated Alan Carrington or just needed something from him that couldn't be given. A father? A past? A place in the world? What he did know was this. He couldn't go back to Madeline until they both had clarity. That night, Eli returned to the orphanage. Not as a boy, but as a man searching for the first pieces of who he had once been. Miss Joyce, now stooped and grey-haired, recognized him immediately. "Eli, my God, you're all grown." He smiled faintly. "I need to know about my mum. Anything you remember." She looked at him for a long moment before nodding and leading him into her small office. "She brought you here herself," Joyce said, pulling out a worn file folder. "Didn't give much detail, just said she couldn't take care of you. She looked broken." "Did she say anything about the father?" Joyce shook her head. "No, but she left this." She opened the folder and handed him a faded letter, folded tightly, edges fraying. Eli opened it slowly. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. "To whoever finds this, please care for my son. His name is Elijah. I'm not well. I don't know how long I have. His father doesn't know about him, and I'm too tired to make him understand. Just give my boy a chance. Please. Julia Wren." Eli's hands trembled as he read the words again and again. She had tried. She had chosen to protect him the only way she could. Outside, the sky was dark and the street lights blinked on one by one. Eli stood under them, the letter still in his hand, wind tugging at the edges. He didn't feel healed. He didn't feel whole. But for the first time in his life, he felt seen. And that, maybe, was the beginning of something. Madeline sat alone in her father's lake house. The same one where she and Eli had first kissed under a shower of August stars. It had always been her refuge, the one place where life quieted down. Now it just echoed. She hadn't spoken to Eli since he went to see her father. She'd barely slept. Her father hadn't answered her calls either, which meant the meeting had happened and left damage in its wake. Her thoughts spun in endless loops. About Eli, about the truth, about the terrifying question neither of them had been brave enough to say out loud. What if we're brother and sister? She'd run the math over and over. The dates, the possibilities. Her father hadn't been with her mother when Madeline was conceived. That much she knew. But he and Julia had overlapped. And if Eli was born just a few months after her... Madeline pressed her palms to her face. God, what are we? A creak of the front door snapped her upright. Eli stepped in. He looked exhausted. Shadows under his eyes, his jaw unshaven. But he was here. She stood, frozen. You came back. I had to, he said. You deserve to know everything. He sat down across from her, and for a moment neither spoke. I saw your father, Eli said. I figured, she murmured. He didn't know about me. I believe that. Madeline nodded slowly. Did he say anything about us? Eli hesitated. He's worried. About reputation. About what people might think. Of course he is, she said bitterly. But I don't care about any of that, Eli said. What I care about is the truth, and you. Madeline looked down. So what is the truth? Eli took a breath, then handed her the letter from Julia, the one from the orphanage. She read it twice, once with disbelief, then again with tears gathering in her eyes. "She loved you," she whispered. "She tried," Eli said, voice cracking. "She didn't leave because she didn't want me. She left because she couldn't stay." Madeline touched the paper like it might fall apart. "And my father, he really didn't know." "No," Eli said. "But that still doesn't answer the big question, does it?" "No," she whispered. They sat in silence, the weight of uncertainty pressing down like fog. Finally, Madeline stood and walked to a cabinet. She pulled out an old wooden box and opened it. Inside were documents, birth certificates, medical records, photos. "This is my mum's," she said, sifting through them. "She gave it to me years ago, said it was everything I might need if she ever passed." She found Madeline's birth certificate and held it up to the light. Her mother's name was there, but the line for father was blank. Then, tucked behind the certificate, she found a letter. She hadn't read this one before. With trembling fingers, she opened it. "Maddie, I never told you the full story. Your father was not the man who raised you. He was someone I loved once, a long time ago. His name was Joseph Archer. We had a short, beautiful, impossible thing. I never told him about you, because by the time I found out, he was married. But I didn't want you to grow up in a lie, so I raised you on my own. You are everything good in me." Mom Madeline's knees buckled, and she sank onto the couch. "Joseph Archer," she whispered. Eli blinked. "Who's that?" "My biological father," she said softly. "Not Alan Carrington." Eli just stared at her. Then slowly, relief began to bloom on his face. Tentative, unsure, but real. We're not, he stammered. She looked up at him, tears spilling down her cheeks. "We're not related." He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. They held each other for a long time, silent, trembling, overwhelmed. Then Eli whispered, "So what do we do now?" Madeline pulled back just enough to look him in the eyes. "We choose." "Choose what?" "What we want our story to be," she said. "We've been shaped by secrets, but we don't have to be defined by them." Eli nodded. "I want you, no matter what our last names are." She smiled, shaky and honest. "I want you too." And just like that, the question that had hovered over them like a sword dissolved. Not because the past didn't matter, but because love, real love, chooses anyway. The summer faded slowly, and with it, the heaviness that had weighed on Madeline and Eli for months. The truth had come out, and it had shaken everything. But it hadn't broken them. Instead, they had begun again. Madeline spent more weekends at the lake house now, renovating one room at a time, filling the space with warmth and intention. She'd taken leave from her job at the firm, unsure if she'd ever go back. For the first time in her life, she was asking herself not what was expected, but what she wanted. One golden afternoon, they stood together on the porch of the lake house. Eli was painting the railing, while Madeline trimmed wildflowers into a jar. "You know," she said casually, "I got a call from my dad yesterday." Eli paused. "How'd that go?" Madeline smiled a little. "Better than I thought. He said he's learning, that he doesn't want to lose me just because he handled things badly." "That's something," Eli said. "Yeah, he also said your name like it didn't burn his tongue," she added. Eli chuckled. "Progress." Madeline leaned against the post and watched him for a while. "Do you think it's weird how different our lives turned out, even though we were so close to being in each other's families all along?" "I think it's kind of poetic," Eli said. "Like we were always circling each other, waiting for the right moment." "You think this is the right moment?" He wiped his hands on a rag and crossed to her. "I think it's ours." She rested her forehead against his. "Do you ever wonder what your mum would say if she could see you now?" He hesitated. "All the time. But I like to think she'd be proud. That I didn't let everything break me." "She'd be more than proud," Madeline said. "She'd love who you are." Eli swallowed. "Sometimes I still feel like that little kid in the hallway, watching people come and go, hoping someone would choose me." Madeline's voice was soft. "You were always worthy of being chosen. They just didn't see it, but I do." He kissed her then, slow and sure. The kind of kiss that says, "I'm here. You're safe. This is real." Later that night, as they sat on the dock with their feet in the water, Eli pulled a small leather-bound notebook from his bag. "What's that?" she asked. "My letters," he said, "to Julia. I started writing them after I found out who she was." Madeline reached for his hand. "Do you want to read one?" he asked. "Only if you're ready." He opened to a page and read aloud, his voice steady. "Dear Mum, I used to think you left because I wasn't good enough, that I was something too heavy to carry. But now I understand you were carrying so much more than I ever knew. I'm learning how to forgive the spaces you left. I'm learning how to fill them with love anyway. I met someone. Her name is Madeline. She makes me believe in second chances, in found families, in threads we never saw but always felt. I think you would have liked her. I think you'd see yourself in her gentleness. Love, Eli." Madeline blinked away tears and kissed the back of his hand. "We don't get to choose where we come from," Eli said, voice thick. "But we do get to choose where we go from here." She nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "So where do we go?" "Wherever we want," he said, wrapping his arm around her. "As long as we go together." The early autumn air was crisp, tinged with the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. The city hummed quietly beneath a sky painted in pale gold and soft lavender. Eli and Madeline stood hand in hand at the little community centre where Eli had spent his first days after leaving foster care. The worn brick building smelled faintly of old books and fresh paint. A place that had held pieces of his past and hope. Today, they were there to celebrate a new chapter, not just for Eli, but for both of them. The room was filled with faces, friends, co-workers, neighbours, and a few family members who had come to see what this young couple, once strangers caught in the tangled threads of secrets, had built together. Madeline looked radiant in a simple cream dress, her eyes shining with quiet joy. Eli, in a navy blazer and jeans, wore a grin that wouldn't quit. As they exchanged vows, words flowed freely. Promises to trust, to honour, to support one another through every twist life might bring. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the room erupted in applause and cheers. Eli caught Madeline's gaze and whispered, "We made it." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "We did, against all odds." Later, as they stepped outside beneath a sky thick with stars, Eli pulled a small box from his pocket. Not a ring, he already wore one, but a locket. He opened it to reveal a tiny photograph of a woman with kind eyes and gentle smile. Julia Wren. "I carry her with me," Eli said softly. "And now I carry you." Madeline leaned in, her breath warm against his cheek. "And I carry you." The past had been a labyrinth of loss and confusion. But here in this moment, they had found clarity and peace. Two souls, once strangers, now family. Not by blood, but by choice. The threads they never saw had woven them together, stronger than they ever imagined. And this was just the beginning. If you like the story, I would be very happy to have your support. Click the thumbs up. And to not miss new stories, subscribe and click on the bell. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and all the best.